This is Craig Houston, your Summit Series host. Welcome to our podcast. The Summit Series is your behind-the-scenes pass to building real value and preparing for what's next, whether that's scaling, selling, or simply stepping back and enjoying what you've already built. Let's dive into what actually drives great outcomes and how you can make them happen. Hey, welcome everybody, and I'm very happy to welcome a friend and colleague, Greg Edwards, who is a wealth manager to our program today. Greg, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, Craig. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you here. And before we get started, listen, you're a South Florida native. You and I both live in South Florida. Tell me a little bit about kind of your love for the water and all things diving and fishing and how you got into your business in the first place.
Well, I'm a native, like you said, to South Florida, born in Fort Lauderdale, and have lived here all my life except for when I was away at college. So certainly growing up down here, was introduced to the water very early on, and actually bought my first boat when I was 11.
Wow.
And had a paper route. My dad said if I could make up enough money to buy the boat, he would buy me a little outboard engine. So I ended up throwing the Pompano shopper on everybody's doorsteps, and probably 6 months later, made enough money to buy the neighbor's John boat down the street. And Dad bought me a 6 horsepower Johnson, and the rest is history. I couldn't tell you how many boats I've had since then, but it is a hole in the water into which you pour money, and it's a great hobby and a great part of the lifestyle here in South Florida.
And listen, I love the work ethic, just the fact that and your dad, that was smart of your dad, to have you raise the money and have a little proverbial pot of gold at the end of the rainbow with his little matching gift. So good for you. That kind of set the path for a long relationship with boats and water for sure.
Yeah, Dad was, he always had some good words of wisdom. But I certainly didn't want to follow in his footsteps in the medical profession. So here I am. I graduated with a degree in finance from the University of South Florida, and immediately got into the insurance business with Cigna, a big insurance conglomerate. And at the time, they had a division which was literally part of Connecticut General Life Insurance Company, and we were doing business and estate underwriting, essentially working with small businesses. Back then, you were selling like pensions and Keogh plans and defined benefit plans, and this new thing called the 401k got created. And so I was working for a big company as a agent, salesperson, also doing the life insurance side of business continuity planning and key man planning and that kind of stuff. And I really enjoyed the whole idea of working with a small or a family business. So while I was there, my business partners for over the last 30 years, Chris Warren and Paul Lawless. I met Paul in high school at Cardinal Gibbons. But we decided we were all there together, and we decided to break off, and instead of being part of like a captive sales agency, starting our own financial planning practice. Those were the early days of financial planning. For the last 39 years, my world has been working with privately held companies, executives, and high net worth individuals. And we got into the wealth management business, so to speak, over 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's what we've been doing. We wanted to sit on the side of the business owner or the client's side of the table and become more of an advisor to clients versus a salesperson to clients. And that's really how our practice has grown. We've been together for over 30 years with our company, have a great staff, been through lots of transactions with people. And yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell my career over the last almost 40 years.
Yeah, I mean, you've done very well. You have a great team. Had the opportunity to work with you guys, and It's really, really good group of folks, and you really do well with your clients. You got, I mean, we're not going to take time to dive into it, but you do some really neat things in terms of just the client experience that you guys provide, that personal touch, and you do stuff that other people don't. And I think as a result of that, you're rewarded. You're rewarded with a lot of growth and some really, really great clients. So congratulations on that.
Thanks, Craig. I appreciate that. I mean, I'll tell you, when you saw we could see the industry changing, and when you had the repeal of Glass-Steagall, which was a long time ago, which basically bifurcated our industries were bifurcated. Insurance, investment banking, all those things were separate businesses. And then when Glass-Steagall came around, it eliminated all those walls came tumbling down, and literally you could buy financial products anywhere.
Yeah.
And then the internet came along, and you can buy financial products anywhere. It's just a matter of understanding what to buy or why I need it, what to buy, and how to buy it, and how to make it work in your personal situation. And that's really what we provide for our clients.
Yeah, and we'll get into this today. I mean,
Sure.
some people's situations can be very complex, and choosing the wrong strategy, the wrong product could have some pretty serious consequences in terms of just missed opportunity, one, but also tax consequences. Could really,
Yep.
you could end up paying a hefty price for choosing poorly, and having somebody that really knows the ins and outs of it, that's on your side of the table, as you said, is super important. So, we've talked about this. The purpose of this podcast, really, we're talking to business owners, and we're really helping them with the value creation side of things, and ultimately, down the road, that leads to some sort of transition. And there could be a sale, which could be an inside sale or an outside sale. There could be a transfer to the family, next gen kind of stuff. There could be any number of things, a sale to employees, and there's resources to be able to do that. And as you said, you've helped clients through several different types of transactions, and your family recently went through their own exit with a business very successfully. But in your experience, like what are some of the things financially that are blind spots for business owners? What are some of the things that they just overlook, or things that they miss?
So I would say when you're running your business, just I've been running my business for 30 years now. I mean, as a business owner, there's so many times where we're running our business for obviously to make profits and do well for our associates, but we're running it because at the end of the year, our CPA or our tax advisor is saying, hey, you got to show less profit, or you're you want to take advantage of a lot of deductions and other strategies to reduce your taxable income.
Yeah.
And as a business owner, as a small business owner, you're that's typically what you're doing when you're running your business. And so many times, families are running their business where, heck, even strategies I've suggested to people, hey, put your kids on the payroll a little bit, fund a Roth IRA, while they're little, and let that money grow. But those are all things that, you're running your car through it. You're paying plane expenses or boat expenses, which you probably, talk to your tax consultant whether
Yeah.
that's legitimate or not. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of stuff that gets run through the business.
Yeah.
All the cell phones, and but look, that's the way they wrote the code. And if it works and it's legal, we're going to suggest to clients take advantage of it. But at the end of the day, if you're now trying to sell something, it's completely the opposite. You're trying to show the buyer what a beautiful gem of a business you have, and you want to make sure that you're showing the maximum profit available to justify the type of multiple you want to get and justify the price that you want to get if you're looking to sell the business. So they're very contradictory
Yeah.
as to how you manage your finances in the business as time goes on. So, you know, I would always suggest to people if you're, so many businesses today are S corps or LLCs, taxes and S corp or something like that. And, in those environments, a lot of times you're trying to minimize, your profits as much as possible. So you're running every expense you possibly can or front loading expenses.
Hmm.
Some of the new tax law allows for 179 deductions again and fully depreciating that. A lot of people will be doing that, I'm sure. But, as you get to trying to position the business for sale, you certainly want to show it where your profits or EBITDA is the highest it can possibly be.
Yeah, and Greg, I'm always picturing like who's out there listening, and a lot of our audience is smaller businesses, a lot of privately owned businesses, and somebody out there right now is going, "What is a 179 deduction? What is that?" You mentioned that.
Well, it's basically, say, for example, you're going to buy, you need to buy a new capital asset, a new tractor, okay, or a bulldozer or something like that. Instead of having to depreciate it over its useful life, under the new tax law, as well as, back in the first Trump tax, whatever they called it, in 2017, you could expense that, okay, as opposed to depreciate it,
Yeah,
which gave you significant tax benefits, which why I believe it'll be very stimulus to what's happening now, because that's now been passed. It's permanent. So if you need new computers or new equipment that normally is going to get depreciated, this provision allows you to expense it that year, which again is going to lower your EBITDA.
yeah. Somebody is just now logging on to an online retailer. I won't mention any names. Probably buying a bunch of stuff right now, just
Right.
after hearing you say that.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so this is interesting because you have this tension between the ongoing business, my day to day, year over year, minimize my taxes, kind of maximize what I can do for my family, and then this idea of some sort of transition coming along, and we've spoken to M&A advisors and brokers and investment bankers, and there's a lot of times when you want to recast your profit, taking all that stuff out, and sometimes people just won't accept it or a bank won't accept it. So doing it at the last minute is not a good idea. So if somebody's starting to think about, hey, I see a finish line coming, or I'm tired, I want to do something else. It's time for me to hand it off to some other person who's got the energy and the vision to run this thing. How far ahead of time should they start really making sure everything's clean, that their finances or the financials are in order, maybe even audited or at least reviewed? Um, when do they start doing that?
That's a great question. I would suggest no less than 3 to 5 years prior to making some type of transition. You bring up a good point. I would have the books at least reviewed at the very least, by your CPA, to make sure that, things are tight relative to what your true earnings of the business look like. And again, a lot of those, sure, you can have adjustments when you start doing valuation things, and that's what every valuation expert that we would bring in is going to do. But the more clean it is leading up to that, the better you're going to be, because look, at the end of the day, it's all about what think of the profit you drop to the bottom line, and the multiple on that is what I mean, that's what you're selling. You
Yeah.
know, that's where your purchase price is going to be driven by that. And the better it looks, the better it's going to be. And that's the most important part of, dressing up your business for some type of transaction.
Yeah, obviously you want to make it as attractive as possible, right? And ideally, when you're working with an advisor or broker, you want to attract as many potential buyers as possible, so that you have the
Yeah.
driver's seat, not somebody else. And so
Another
go ahead.
another important metric that people and many business owners are aware of this, but you want to be tight on your KPIs. You should know those inside and out for your industry and your business, because that's going to also help articulate to the buyer, what the business is worth.
Yeah.
Because you have tight metrics and very tight financials. Um, we've had a number of clients, one last year, that we were in the process of doing a transaction, and we basically recommended, and he ended up taking our advice to push off the sale for a year,
Yeah.
because his books were just in such a mess. I mean, he had everything in QuickBooks. Not that there's anything wrong with QuickBooks, but at the end of the day, he had outgrown a lot of that technology, and he just
Yeah.
needed to get things right. And the business broker even brought it to his attention, and it was the right move, because it'll certainly make him more money down the road.
Yeah. And then people need to realize that, right? Sometimes you got to go slow to go fast and to go far,
Right.
and taking the time. So 3 to 5 years to kind of start the process. The KPIs for sure important. It also lets a potential buyer not only know how buttoned up you are, but how you stack up against competitors in
Sure.
the industry or the marketplace. Um, when you go through financials, you've mentioned a couple of times, EBITDA and multiples, and those are really the two key factors, right? Maybe occasionally, if you're a SaaS company or something like that, and you're not making profit yet, it might be some multiple of revenue, but for the most part, it's going to be some version of profit or seller's discretionary earnings times a multiple, and that equals value. And so for a buyer or for a seller, they might hear the word valuation, they might hear the word quality of earnings, something that's certified or qualified, something that's an opinion. What does that even mean? And does a business owner even need to know those numbers?
Well, the business owner should at the very least be aware of those numbers. What normally in the process of selling a business, you're going to go through, because there's a third party, or the buyer is going to probably engage a third party to give what is called a quality of earnings
Yeah.
opinion. And again, that's where a lot of the negotiation and the deal or the transaction happens. Um, so a lot of times you'll get a letter of intent, but that letter of intent may be very different than what the actual transaction looks like, because of the quality of earnings. To prepare for that, again, that's where I say, if you can, because again, they're going to be, the quality of earnings is going to have lots of adjustments for personal items, add backs, subtractions, that kind of stuff. And the cleaner that is, the better you're going to go through that process.
Yeah.
Um, but the Q of E, we had it done by Baker Tilly when we sold one of our businesses, my wife's business, or the buyer had it done. It was very, very eye-opening, but it was in a good way as well. So, but yeah, that's important stuff to have tightened up.
So yeah, so super important. And as you said, it can be very eye-opening. In your case, it was a good way. Sometimes it could be pretty shocking. There's 80% of businesses don't sell. And even those that do, 3/4 of those people have some sort of regret at the end of that journey. And oftentimes it's that the business isn't worth what they thought it was going to be worth, or they think they have this retirement set for life, and what they get out of the deal isn't enough to close that gap, and they fall a little bit short. So how does wealth management, how does something that you do not only intersect with the business deal, but the family itself, right? Because these are legacy things that we're talking about with business owners that doesn't just impact them individually, but potentially their entire family. So how do you work and show up with and handling the family dynamics during an exit or some sort of succession plan?
Well, you have a lot going on in that question.
I think that might be the world's longest run on
Yeah,
question.
I would tell you, look, the family business, a privately held business, I say this to clients every time I meet a new person. I invest a lot of money, billions of dollars for families and institutions. I should not be investing your money for you. The best thing you can do is invest money in your business. It's the most profitable thing you know. It's the most, you have the most control over it. But at the end of the day, you only have a few choices. You can't call the New York Stock Exchange if you die, become disabled, or ultimately want to retire. So those are the things a good wealth manager is going to help you plan through. And again, it at the end of the day, if you say, "Hey, my goal is to transition this business," you're really limited to 3 or 4 strategies. One is I could have a family member come in and take over the business. And I've seen lots of very successful transitions with that. Um, Another strategy would be you could sell it to your management team. So if you have a good management team and you're comfortable selling it to them and you guys come to an agreement, that's a great strategy to see the continuity of your business continue. 9 times out of 10, you're going to be holding a pretty good sized seller note in that transaction. Another one is a third party. Okay, that third party could just be a investor, private equity firm of sorts,
Yeah.
a strategic buyer, probably the most valuable one to you. But if you've got a strategic buyer, that's a tremendous way to do it. And then lastly, probably one of my favorite opportunities is to do an ESOP. And if you have the right business and the right employee mix and the right scenario, an ESOP is a tremendous way to not be forced to sell your business, but see your employees be able to benefit from the fruits of the labor of their labor in your business that you help build and create, and you'll be handsomely paid. And if you do it right and you strategize correctly, you'll save a lot of taxes in doing that type of strategy. But that's kind of where you want to keep and stay scenario. But again, working with a wealth manager, what that person should be doing for you is I describe it to clients as, look, you got all this stuff tied up in your business, and typically your business, you probably own some real estate, you've bought all kinds of inventory, or you have tons of equipment you need to run your business, etc. Well, that money pile needs to be converted into something if you're going to retire other than just stock in your business or these assets. And that's
Yeah.
what a good wealth manager will help you understand is how big does that money pile need to be to make sure that you can maintain the lifestyle you want to have for the rest of your life. And maybe it's your family's life, or maybe you're trying to leave a legacy. Uh, and that gets into a whole nother dynamic of estate planning, et cetera. But, you know, it's identifying how big does that need to be? Because I can tell you, I've seen and many transactions where somebody has sold their business and ended up thinking, oh, I could sell it for X. Well, I can take the money and I'll just invest it in Y. I had this happen before the dot-com bubble.
Mm.
Guy said, if you remember the last few years of the 90s, market went up 10, 20% every year.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I'll sell the business and I'll invest it at 10%. And, things are great. You bought the .com thing happens, he sells. The next thing you know, he's blown himself up and he doesn't have enough money to keep retiring. He had to start all over again.
Yeah.
You don't want to have that happen. And that's where working again with a good wealth manager, a good attorney, or a good CPA, you're going to position yourself for success. And I would always recommend that that money pile needs to be big enough to make sure whether it's you and your wife, you and your family are going to live the way you want to live. And if it's not, then don't do it. Keep running your business. But
Yeah.
if
And
it is, everything else from there is gravy. It's a blessing.
yeah, and I've seen personally, Greg, owners that they have a number. We'll just make a number up. Let's say the number's $5 million that they think they need to live as you said, the way that they want to live and support their families and their lifestyle and do the things they want to do. And so they get an offer for 5 million and they think that, okay, this is great. And they aren't seeking good counsel, they aren't seeking good advice, and they're not realizing that they're going to pay a lot in taxes. They're going to pay some fees to brokers and attorneys and all kinds of people, and all of a sudden that 5 million is 3 million, and they have a pretty big gap. And like you said, it could be enough to live, but maybe not at the lifestyle that you wanted, or you might need to go start all over again. So yeah, having somebody that can coach you through that and make sure they're asking the right questions and letting you know as the owner what the impact of some of those decisions could be is so important. We live in a day and age where everybody will go on the internet to try to find answers to stuff, or now it's AI. I could see somebody doing a little chat on AI saying, "Hey, sell my business for me," and then not realizing that that was a really bad idea.
I think that when you're dealing with something that's the biggest asset you have and the most valuable asset you have, it would be wise to seek good advice because you only have one opportunity to do that. And there's lots of cool stuff on the internet, but I'd rather have somebody call me old school, but at least showing me the ropes and making
Yeah.
sure I'm not doing it. I have recourse against what they're doing. So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Families, let's talk about families a little bit. The dynamics can be pretty crazy. Um, you might have with families, it's really interesting because you can have family members that work in the business but don't own part of the business. You could have family members that own part of the business, don't work in the business. You could have family members that don't work in the business, don't own anything in the business. And then you have people that are all three, right? They're an owner, they're a family member, and they work in the business. Typically, the person who founded it falls in that category. Sometimes some other family members. There can be a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety created within a family. People talking about what's fair. A person who's working, let's say you got a family member that's an owner but not in the business, one that is. The person that's in the business, they own the same percentage of the business. The one doing all the work is creating the wealth and the opportunity. The other person's passively enjoying it, and that can cause a lot of tension. So how do you handle some of those family meetings and conversations and get some of that out there? Because I know a lot of families are very reluctant to talk about things like money.
Well, I'll tell you what, AI is not going to solve that problem.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, you're getting into a very personal and what I welcome discussion with the business owner, typically the patriarch. Um, uh, and there's going to be all kinds of dynamics involved with what to do. And as you said earlier, most businesses don't even pass on to the next generation.
Yeah.
Vast majority of them never do. Um, so again, that's where a very lengthy discussion, it's going to involve people like myself. I try to spearhead that discussion personally. I like to have those conversations with business owners. Um, then you're going to need to engage typically good legal counsel to help you through the process. But you certainly, there are many ways that, and it all depends on what the client's objective is,
Yeah.
whether it's a state, I'm trying to equalize stuff, or perhaps I'm trying to provide opportunities for some of the other folks in the business. But that really is a deep dive, and it's something you have to do because you don't want to leave it to chance.
Yeah.
That's why most businesses fail at the first, the person, the patriarch who started that business, very few make it to the second generation.
And
Uh,
even fewer make it to the third. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. That's a very small percentage that get to the third. And quite frankly, it's one of the reasons why in our family situation, I'm so proud that we in 1997 were able to buy a business from my in-laws and really exceed our expectations with the business during the last 30 years. And after owning it for 57 years, it was time because the family dynamics were such that it was never going to get to the third generation. We saw that
Hmm.
without too much, there was going to be way too much conflict, family
Yeah.
conflict. And those are the dynamics you really have to dig deep and discover through the discovery process. And a good wealth manager or a good attorney, a business attorney, can help people through that process. And it's, to me, it's a whole team. It takes, you need a good banker or business broker, business consultant guy or gal that can help you through that. You need a good person who's got good legal skills, a wealth manager, and a darn good CPA
Hmm.
to help you through this process. I'll
Yeah.
share
So,
with you a couple
yeah, go ahead, please.
successes and failures.
Okay.
And I'm going to start with a failure. And for those of us who grew up in South Florida, it's a family that so many of us we love, and sometimes they make us cry. And
Hmm.
it's the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah.
And when I was a kid, I used to go down to the old Orange Bowl back in the 70s. I went and watched the undefeated season with my dad and my brothers, watching Mercury Morris and Bob Greasy, and they were owned by the Robbie family.
Yeah.
Okay. And here's a scenario where, who would have thunk, but the way the stars aligned and the passing of mom and the passing of dad, and next thing you know, they didn't have a good plan in place. And back then, the estate taxes were such that they were forced to sell the team because they needed liquidity to pay Uncle Sam the estate taxes.
Yeah.
And guess who came in? And he wasn't their knight in shining armor. It was Wayne Huizinga.
Yeah.
And he got a deal on the Miami Dolphins back then. And that was all in the newspaper. Um, and it was just a scenario where poor planning led to it cost their family a lot of money, in my opinion, because Wayne's family sold that business for billions of dollars
Yeah. Yeah.
down the road, and they didn't have as good a team.
Yeah. That's for sure. We haven't had it as we don't want to hammer the Miami Dolphins, but
No,
they haven't had that good a team in a long
no,
time.
no, we have not. So it's
Yeah.
been tough being a Dolphin fan. That's why I say something. They make me cry a lot, but anyway, we end up with so that's an example, and I could that you multiply that by thousands, and that's what happens Like I said earlier, it's the largest asset somebody owns. It's also the most illiquid asset you own. But then, you can have a company where one of our clients over the last 30 years, we've worked with them. But to see that family go from where I remember when the boys were small little kids to where today, because of the transition planning we've done over the last really 15 years, they're equal owners with dad. And that business they employ 700 plus employees down here. They do well over 200 million plus in revenue. Very profitable business.
Yeah.
It's made all of them a lot of money because we were able to transition the business out of, mom and dad's estate and get the key people that were running the business in ownership.
Yeah.
But that's one of those deals where their goal all along was we have no interest in selling, don't want to diversify. We love the business. We see our boys in the business, and that's what they have today. And we have a great continuity plan with the rest of the shares that mom and dad own. And it's a well thought out strategy, but you can also very successfully, again, with the right players, pull that off, and it's done very well for the family.
Yeah. And, just in those two examples, having that continuity plan is so important. And in the first example, again, which is, like you said, it's in the newspaper, what was in the newspaper, and very public and very sad for the family. On the other side of that, they find out all the stuff they could have done, right? All the stuff they should have done. And so
Sure.
now there's even deeper regret because it was avoidable. And, there are so many things that can happen unplanned that cause a family or a business owner into a sale, right? They may be thinking, I don't want to sell the business, or they may be thinking 3 to 5 years down the road, but something can happen, right? It could be
Right.
a death, it could be a disability, it could be just the bottom falls out of the market, it could be COVID, right? You just never know what can happen to a business. So somebody in your position, playing a critical role on that advisory team for a business owner, what should they be thinking about when it comes to mitigating those kind of risks so that they just literally don't have to worry about it anymore?
Well, the biggest issue to me is liquidity. So understanding how much liquidity your business needs in the event of a downturn in the economy, in the event of, what if what if you're still alive? You just can't function. I mean, that's a big issue. Or are you required to be there every day to run the business? And but if God forbid something ultimately happens to you, what's going to happen to the business?
Yeah.
And the worst thing to me is you build up an asset. Um, it's the biggest asset you have, and why leave it to chance? With just a little bit of planning, you can certainly, I mean, God forbid, do it for your employees.
Yeah.
Make sure that you have a continuity plan, that at least your people have some time to figure out what's going to happen in their lives. I always use an acronym. I like to work with people, and I use the acronym IRS. People hate the IRS. Okay.
Yeah.
But to me, the IRS stands for somebody's intelligent, they're responsible, they care, and they're successful. Those are the kind of folks that I can help, and we can formulate strategies for, because that is very important to them. So the IRS isn't bad in my world, especially if it's a referral that I got to to a new client. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah. And it kind of leads to my last question, because after everything's said and done, like you said, for the most part, businesses don't transition to the next generation, certainly not the third or fourth typically. And we both know of situations where those transitions in the third and fourth generation have been incredibly successful, but very rare. So once it's all said and done, and now the family has this newfound wealth because they've been able to materialize that through the sale of a business. Back to those family dynamics, how does mom or dad maintain family harmony after all that's done? What are some of the tricks of the trade, so to speak, that you bring to the table that help them do that?
Well, I would say the most valuable thing that people can do is communicate.
Hmm.
And communication at this stage of the game, if we're talking, you've now been you're post sale, you've done all the celebrating, you now have the money pile you dreamed about, or your goal was to get. The important thing to me is communicate with your family what's important to you, vision, mission, the strategies, philanthropy,
Yeah.
very important. So if you're working with the right wealth manager, those people, or that person, or those people should be looking at this prior to the sale. And there's all kinds of cool techniques that you can utilize that are not only going to help your family, but they're also going to help society. Because at the
Hmm.
end of the day, you are not going to take it with you.
Yeah, boy, that's for sure.
It's not going to happen. I hate to tell you. And hopefully, if we do it right for you, you'll never be able to spend all the money. But at the end of the day, it's not going with you. And my goal is to make sure that you can do one of three things with money. You can either transfer it to your family, okay? You're going to send part of it to the IRS. People hate that. All right. But if you have a large enough estate, a large enough business, the next thing you know, you're at a 40% estate tax, just like the Robbie family.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? That money's due 9 months after you die. And I've been through it. I know it. At the end of the day, if you don't want to send it to Washington, D.C. and have them redistribute your money, why not figure out a way that I can use philanthropy to benefit society in the causes I care about?
Yeah.
Not not the idiots up in Washington. We've seen that for, I've seen it for a long, long time, and it's never going to end. We live in the greatest country out there. Capitalism is one of the most incredible things our founding fathers created. It's also one of the cruelest things that exists
Yeah.
because it's the survival of the fittest. And if I can build a widget or make something better than you, I have the opportunity to sell it in this great country, and I may make more money than you, and I may put you out of business.
Yeah.
But that's the cool thing. But I also, something I like to do with clients, and depending on the scenario that you have, I think this is a really cool thought for people that have children that maybe aren't in the business, or maybe they have ideas of their own, or maybe one went off to be a neurosurgeon, and his desires and needs are different. But a way to have the family participate in the family wealth is to create a family bank.
Hmm.
Okay, so you slow down on nepotism. You don't have those disputes. It's like, okay, if Johnny wants to start a new company and everybody's upset because dad's going to loan Johnny the money, well, what if the family bank loaned Johnny the money and the family had say in how that went, how that all happened? Um, it can create problems, but believe me, at the end of the day, it's a very fair way to give your children advantages and also allow the family to perpetuate wealth. And we call it the family bank. Not everybody does it, but I think it's a really cool way. because most businesses, when your kids are at that age or they're starting out, you're trying to start it, it's a startup. They need an angel.
Yeah,
If
for
mom and
sure.
dad are still there, they could be the angel, or maybe mom and dad left an angel that could help them start it. So think about that.
Yeah, I love that. That's something that I have not heard before, and I really like the idea of that and getting the family involved for sure. So as we kind of come to the end of this, Greg, first of all, thank you so much for um, what all you've shared. Um, and we talked about the Robbie family. We talked about another client of yours that had some success in transition. And you had mentioned an ESOP as a way for an owner to transition to the employees. And a lot of owners, they recognize that the team that they have around them helped create what they have, right? It wasn't just them. They relied on a lot of people who have spent, in some cases, an entire lifetime with them building the business, and they want to reward them with that. So, kind of to kind of close it out with that thought, do you have an example of like a really successful uh, employee purchase through an ESOP?
Sure. Um, an old friend of mine had an expression. His name was Jim Moran, and it was, "The future belongs to those who prepare for it." Well, an ESOP to me is one of the coolest transition tools you can use, but it takes preparation. And the best example I can give you is a company that we all visit frequently called Publix.
Hmm.
And many years ago, over 30 years ago, Publix decided to create an ESOP, and they are 100% employee-owned company now. And there are tellers or cashiers that check you out at Publix that are multimillionaires,
Hmm.
worked there for decades, and they've gotten their ESOP stock and participated in the ESOP plan. And that's one of the most successful private ESOPs that still exist today. Another one that went public was UPS.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, but look, at it, like if you're 30, 40, $50 million business and you want to transition something like that, I'll just leave you with this concept. You take if you're a C corp, there's all kinds of things you can do. But if you're an S corp, just think of your S corp every year. You pay a dividend, and that dividend is taxed.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what if that dividend wasn't taxed? Think of the growth you could create in your business. If I have 37% more of my cash flow than I do today, because the ESOP doesn't pay taxes. So it's a great growth strategy. Most people look at it as a way to exit, but if you do the right type of ESOP with the right structures, you're going to turbocharge the earnings capability of your business. And that's a very powerful way to do it. Um, and it's also where you can pull money out very tax advantaged.
Yeah.
And since we're not talking about ESOPs today, but that is a very wonderful tool to transition a business if the right situation is there.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those who are listening outside of Florida, Publix is a Florida family owned or privately owned, employee owned now grocery chain. It's been around for a long time, practically on every corner, and they do a great job of serving Florida. I think even expanding a little bit
Oh yeah, no,
into
they're in the southeast
other areas of the
now.
Southeast.
They're in
Yeah,
Georgia. They're in South Carolina. They're in North Carolina. South Carolina for sure.
yeah,
My daughter just graduated from there, and I've seen them there.
yeah.
But no, ESOPs are a pretty cool way to help with this type of planning for a client.
So, Greg, if there's somebody out there that's listening, I don't want you to be inundated with people that aren't the ideal client for you. But if somebody wanted to learn more, just in general, how do they go about deciding who a good wealth manager is? How do they pick one? There's so many large, big brokerage places, that people recognize. There's banks that people recognize. There's platforms online that people recognize. How do you pick a good financial person to be in your corner on your side of the table?
Well, I would, I'm a little biased. I've been a CFP almost my entire career. So the CFP trademark is very important, I believe, for people in our business. It just means that you've done a rigorous curriculum that you had to go through and pass, as well as a rigorous test. It takes 3 years to obtain that certification. So yeah, I would say certified financial planner is a good one. Another one would be CFA, Chartered Financial Analyst. And relative to the securities industry, so if you're investing money, certainly you want to work with an associate that's either registered with a significant firm, or like we are, is more on the independent side. And I would want to make sure there are no conflicts of interest relative to the business that they're performing.
Yeah.
And what you can also do there is the FINRA which is the securities industry regulator. You can go on their website and look at you can Google or go on their website, look up the person's name, and you should be able to find out if they've had any complaints or violations associated with them. It's called a U4.
Okay. So definitely do the homework, right? And the homework in this day and age is pretty easy to do.
It is.
And find out.
Yeah, those would be
goes a long way.
In the wealth management space, we've tried to be, we're completely transparent, fee-based, independent. That's one way. Look, there's great guys friends of mine that work at Morgan Stanley or Merrill Lynch or what have you. There's very good people there too. But I certainly look at the person's qualifications, experience, and CFP, CFA type designations. Those are important, as well as you can do a background check, and the background check is the FINRA website.
Yeah.
And that's the regulatory body in our industry if the person is securities licensed, and you can do a background check through that and find out if there have been violations of regulations or complaints.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, Greg. I really appreciate it. I think you've just added incredible value to our listeners and the business owners out there. I hope you take this advice to heart and reach out to your wealth manager, your team, or do the homework that Greg just suggested and make sure you have somebody on your side of the table. So thank you very much. And thank you, Greg.
My pleasure.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Summit Series. Please make sure to click on the follow button on your podcast app so you never miss an episode of our show. This episode was produced by Paige King and was edited by Matt Houston. I'm Craig Houston, and you've been listening to the Summit Series.